What is your own assessment about this whole thing? Adding more, giving GRA a bigger task to collect more revenue.
The I think when I listen to those press conferences or those announcements, I wish people would ask them more relevant questions because people tend to focus on the wrong amount. The key point here is not that they are raising a slightly bigger amount. That could be good or bad. What we need to ask ourselves is when GRA is increasing this amount, what does it entail? Because tax revenue, when you collect it, there are three things that determine the quantity
Okay.
you get. The biggest contributor is what's called the tax base. This is the set of economic activities that can actually be taxed. The larger this thing is, the better. The other component is the actual tax rate. For different kinds of tax things that are tax have a associated tax rate. You have personal income tax rate. There's a tax rate for that.
Yeah.
If you have rental property, there's a tax rate for rental property. If you are a company, there's a tax rate for corporate income tax. There's a rate for capital gains. There's a rate for VAT.
Yeah.
So you have the tax rate in general. It's a catch-all for all of those.
Yeah.
So now, in general, a slight increase in the tax rate, you can also collect a bit more, but you have to be careful. You cannot keep increasing that, and I'll come to why you cannot do that. Then the third aspect again that also affects the tax revenue we collect is the collection efficiency. So collection efficiency basically is that given a tax base you have and given your tax rate, what percentage of your tax base are your tax agents going to actually collect taxes from? It is the combination of these three things together that determine the tax revenue. Some of them you can change easily, some of them you cannot change easily. And some things, if you change because they're easy to change, you can do more harm than good in the long term. The one thing that is very difficult to change, and which is the most important part, is the tax base. The tax base, again, I said, is the collection of economic activity that can potentially be taxed by the government to generate tax revenue. This means, your economy is doing well. Businesses are coming up, contracts are being done, goods and services are being produced, profits are being made, infrastructure is being built, land and other things, assets are being traded, capital gain is being made, corporate income tax is being done, goods and VAT taxes are being generated. Now, the thing is that this is not something that the government can change from year to year. It is a function of how well the economy is doing. It doesn't matter. The government, if the economy is doing very well, the tax base will grow. And even if you reduce the tax rate, you can even collect more because more people are doing more activities. In fact, if you reduce the tax rate, some people who are hiding, now they don't fear the need to hide. They don't feel the need to hide, and you'll be able to tax more people and you get higher tax revenue. So the collection efficiency basically just means the efficiency of GRA as an institution to hire people, to identify all those people who hold tax obligations to pay them. So the one thing that the government has direct control over by just changing legislation or regulation is the tax rate. Saying corporate income tax, instead of 29% is 30%, or they can lower it. The same thing for rental income, the same thing for VAT. So what we need to ask ourselves is, if GRA tells us that we are going to, our target for tax revenue is going to be this amount, it's going to be this amount higher than last year, the question we need to ask them, okay, what is the source of that increase? Do you expect that increase to come from the fact that the tax base is going to increase, and in which sectors of the economy? Or are you going to change the tax rate in any particular area, whether personal, corporate, VAT, or capital gains? Or are you going to make GRA as an institution a lot more efficient by opening more offices and making sure that this thing is collected? We need to ask ourselves that. Yeah, because if we don't ask ourselves, it's difficult to say whether or not that increase is good or not. Because let me tell you why it can be good or bad. If government decides to set a target for GRA, and GRA management knows that if they don't meet that target, their jobs may be on the line. And they are approaching October, November, and they don't see, there are activities that you can overtax in such a way that, you put businesses out of, you take them out of business, out of operations. You may get your revenue, that your tax revenue, but then tomorrow your tax base will shrink. Yeah. In the long term, your economy will not grow. So the tax revenue is important. I mean, obviously, as you said, without tax revenue, your government cannot finance development expenditures. We cannot depend only on handouts. And the tax we pay is one of our means of holding government accountable, making so they do what we are supposed to do. And without sufficient tax revenue, with this government running deficit year in and year out, the debt will continue to grow. So for me, my concern here is that by thinking about tax revenue targets on a year-to-year basis, they are focusing much more on short-term tax revenue without thinking about the long-term issue of tax base, because you cannot talk about changing tax base from year to year. You don't have that control over it. Yeah. Sometimes it might make sense to actually target a lower tax revenue collection to allow businesses to grow, because there are some businesses where they should not be made to pay tax in their first or second year or tax year. But Gambia is the only country where they tax revenue, they tax businesses, not on profit, but on your revenue. If you start a farm today and you plant trees, your trees may start producing after a year or so, but your profit as an agricultural farm will not be positive until about 5 or 6 years. Yet, in Gambia's tax law, in the GRA Act, they will be taxing you on your revenue. So while you are making a loss, you will still pay tax. So while it may look like the government is collecting tax revenue, but some of those businesses that would have survived and hire more people down the road, they would go out of business. So this is why this myopic focus on the incremental tax revenue from year to year is something that should be of concern to us, especially when they don't do a careful discussion on where the source of that tax revenue is. Is it from the tax base? Is it from the manipulation of the tax rate? Or is it from the collection efficiency?
This will be interesting to hear from the GRA. I'll try to, normally I used to have, every end of the year, have an interview with the Commissioner General or the Deputy, just to look at what is the plan for this year coming. So I'll try to do that. I think this, you just raised some very important issues. Where is this coming from?
Exactly.
So I'll try to have that. Finally, you talk about general debt.
Yeah.
And you wrote an article about this. So what is this all about?
No, well, the debt issue, everyone, I think now many Gambians...
you told us already, we're in debt distress.
Yeah.
So,
and people should know what that distress means. There'll come a time, well, a company, we know when your liabilities become too higher than your asset, you file for bankruptcy. Yeah. A country doesn't go into bankruptcy, but that's the same thing as the analogy for a country is debt distress.
So that's the analogy. Okay.
Yes, it does debt distress, and this is when now your economy is not under your control. Your creditors now control everything. This is when the IMF will come down. They'll have somebody sitting at the Ministry of Finance and at Central Bank telling the government, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, this is what you do, this is what you need to do. This is what is going to happen, because currently, our budget, 30% of our budget goes into debt service. The amount we put into debt service is more than what we put into any sector. Health, education, agriculture, infrastructure, what have you. All of these things, what we pay into debt service. And this government is making the situation just worse and worse. Let me give you an example. So we've seen the budget this year. It was submitted to National Assembly 15th of November. A bit too late, but that's not the only problem. Right after they passed the budget, and the budget was submitted and it was passed, on 2nd of December, this government went and took a big loan from the Islamic Development Bank, over 2 billion.
After submitting the budget?
After submitting the budget.
Was it included in the budget?
No, it was not. So
before we take loans, are we not supposed to get approval from the National Assembly?
Yes, they went and sought approval only after the budget was passed. So our National Assembly members also failed us. They should have made this minister appear before and explain before the whole country why he did not include it in the 2025 budget. Because let me tell you, this was signed in 2nd December.
The loan was signed.
The loan, which means it was approved by Islamic Development Bank weeks before, which also meant that the negotiation between the government and Islamic Development Bank months before.
Yes.
So there is no reason why not to include that. And now you can say, okay, maybe the reason they didn't include it, maybe the loan repayments and other things will not occur in 2025. Now, it is true that there is a grace period, but then 2 of the payments will start in 2025.
2 of the payments?
Yes.
But it's not budgeted for?
No, it's not. It's not in the budget.
How are we going to pay for that?
Well, as many people have pointed out, our budget credibility is low. Each year, what the government say we are going to spend, we are going to do, at the end of the year, when you look at what they actually spend, it's very different.
So where is the money this loan that we took, where is it going to? Is it specified for something?
Yes, so they said they are going to complete the Battle-Harding Highway, the side parts.
2 billion.
Yes, over 2 billion. It's well over 2 billion. So basically from Airport Johnson to Sting Corner. But here is an example of the government taking debt when we don't need it. If you look at this budget, 2025, it is possible, this amount is possible to get out of this budget without taking a loan.
How?
No, because just by prioritizing it. There are things we are spending money on in this budget that we don't need. You know, right now, we spend over 2 billion in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Gambia doesn't need even 500. So here you can save 1.5 billion. The money that's going into the State House is more than the money that's going to the Supreme Court and the National Assembly combined.
Yes.
The money that the government spent on these vehicles that we don't need is over 10. I don't know how many. It's over 1 billion.
Yeah.
You know, so there are many things currently, and the money that is being spent on the fueling of those and all other unnecessary expenditures and travels that they say they've stopped. You could fit this loan. You can fit that in the 2025 budget. So here is this minister going before the National Assembly telling them that we are close to debt distress. If you believe that truly we are close to debt distress, there are things that you are supposed to do, which means being efficient in the way you spend your money. It means prioritizing your expenditures so that you focus your resources on things that will produce economic and social returns. Unnecessary and wasteful expenditures, you avoid them. But you just, despite what you have said, you went and, after the budget is passed, you went and took a loan of over 2 billion. And this loan is going to involve a lot of procurement. And we know in that process, as in any of this infrastructure process, when there's procurement, how many millions will be lost. You know, we mentioned about that there should be auditing of this OIC road. It's not done yet. I can guarantee you when a proper auditing is done, millions will be missing. Just like this loan that is being taken, when it's being implemented, millions will be lost and our debt would increase. And this burden of this loan, you know, is going to be on in the next few years on younger people and other administration down the road, you know. But this is a loan that is so this gives you an idea of why we are in debt distress. It's not because the money, we are taking money that we absolutely need and we have no choice for it. We are willfully working into a debt distress by taking loans that are not necessary. And actually, in doing that, trying to hide them when they could actually be, you know, brought before in a transparent way to the, you know, to the whole nation and to the National Assembly.
Interesting.
You know?
Finally, Dr. Gajigo, I'm just looking at the budget one more time, and I look at the Ministry of Tourism, 54 million, the Minister of Youth and Sports.
Mm-hmm.
If any government that is serious about youth development, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, youth and sports combined, 135 million. That is close to the presidency's travel budget. How can you develop youth when the youths are over 60% of this country? Their budget, if you take salaries and travels out of it, there's nothing for youth development in this budget. What does that, you know, when you look at our budget, When you look at the ministry, the state debt service, 11 billion, the president's office, 1 point something billion, National Assembly, 446, Judiciary, 311, IEC, 189, Public Service, 17 billion, Ministry of Defense, 1.1, Ministry of Interior, 1.9 billion, Ministry of Tourism, 54 million, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 1.9, almost 2 billion. Ministry of Justice, 205. Ministry of Finance, I don't know what they do at Ministry of Finance, 205 million, even way more than Ministry of Youth and Sports. Ministry of Pensions and Gratuities, 559. We don't pay anything to our pensioners. Office of the Ombudsman, 53 million. Centralized Services, 1.6 billion. Ministry of Lands, 389. Agriculture, 961 million. Transport, and infrastructure, 2.2 billion. Ministry of Trade, 136. Basic Education, 5 billion. I think that's the highest.
So this must be the recurrent budget part.
Yeah.
It doesn't include the development part.
Health, 2.7. Youth and Sports, 135. Environment, 282. Information, 67. Fisheries, 56 million. Education, higher education, 4.5. Petroleum, 1.2. Gender, 98. Human Rights Commission, 74. Minister of Information and Communication and Digital Economy, 96. Public Service, 452 million. What does it tell you? If you look at just the numbers, what is our direction? We are not...
No, basically, what these numbers, they tell you a couple of things. The first and foremost is, if you compare those numbers you are reading with the development part, this is just to basically recurrent expenditures.
Yeah.
You compare this number to the development. This is way higher than the development budget. Number two, you mentioned some of these, like Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that high amount, which is way higher than Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Tourism. Why do we need this expensive budget? Expensive embassies in Russia? Why do we need 2 in the U.S.? Why do we need these embassies in Cuba and Venezuela? We have embassies in many countries that are bordering on each other. We are just, and whenever somebody is fired, instead of firing them, they are redeployed to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And all of these so-called opposition who last time formed their political parties at the last minute formed an alliance with NPP, they all got rewarded. The likes of General Mane, Ganu, Haidara, and PPP's leader, they all are in ambassador positions right now. So this is a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that's costing us a lot of money. You have over 2 billion that is going over there. A big chunk of that, and this is each single year. If you take this over a 5-year period, do you know how many roads you can build between here and Brikama? Or power plants, or hospitals, or schools, or universities? But what are these embassies doing or generating? How many Gambians do you know who can tell you, I've been in the US or UK or in these countries for many years, and how many I don't even know that where are the embassies? I've spent many years outside. I've never stepped foot in a Gambian embassy. What are they actually doing there? I'm not saying that the country shouldn't have a foreign affairs. Of course, the country should have some embassies. But you cut your cloth according to your size. Before you put billions in embassies, you have hospitals that don't have medicine. You have schools that don't have teaching materials. You have roads that are not paved. You need to know what to prioritize. You have a country where power outage is the norm. Every single day we're experiencing power outage. Yet you are spending billions of dollars each year on these embassies. Why? These are things we should be asking ourselves. Which is, when I looked at this budget here and I compared with the loan that was taken, that over 2 billion, I know that loan didn't need to be taken. All you have to do is rearrange those figures there. You can fix this road here without a single loan. But what is going to happen now? That loan has interest. It has a grace period of at least 5 years. So they intentionally negotiated a long grace period so that they won't have to worry about this loan payment now, for the time being. But when the repayment starts, the next government that's coming in is going to have to pay a huge amount and finish that loan repayment within a very short time period, in about 5 years or so. So the annual payments will be very high, you know. So this budget basically shows that public finance management of this government is poorly mismanaged. They know what the consequences are because it is the minister's own mouth that you utter the phrase debt distress. Yet, instead of behaving appropriately in a way you should when there is debt distress, no, you are going to exacerbate the problem.